During the website launch, a lot of people will come and think that, it's just pushing a button to launch a site. That is not the case. It's not an instant process. It can take a few hours, and it is a very carefully planned process.
Hello and welcome to this week's ProfileTree podcast. This week I'm joined by David and Emer. So myself and Emer are from the client services team, and then David is one of our developers. And this week we're going to be talking about what clients think happens versus what actually happens in a website project. A fun myth-busting episode about the website design process. So we're going to kind of work this in three parts. So we're each going to kind of take part. Me and Emer will focus on the client services side of things, and David's going to take us through the website process or the development process. So I'm going to start off and speak a little bit about the kind of pre-project, so like the biz dev discovery, kind of the lead up until David will jump in as a developer. And then after that, Emer is going to talk about post-development, so areas like QA and site launch and aftercare. So starting off with the discovery call. So on that call, usually somebody from biz dev or client services would join, and also we generally have a developer on that call as well. So in that call, it's kind of to discuss some potential ideas for your project. What features do you want from your new website? What do you like or dislike about your old website? So some kind of preconception or myth in that would be, you need to know exactly what you're looking for coming into that call. Like part of that is, we're there to help you, especially, when we're bringing developers and that on, and kind of probably from the client services side with our expertise and experience as well, is to make it more collaborative and work together, almost like idea generation. So even if you're not kind of 100% sure of what you want, we can help and talk through and kind of brainstorm or give examples of previous projects that we've worked on and what really works for people, or what kind of has made their lives easier, or if their goal is to improve sales or boost conversions, what's worked for them in the past and kind of similar websites. Following that, then our next step would be, from our side, we would draft a proposal for this. So taking in things again like budgets, requirements, wish lists, and everything like that. So we'd usually kind of gather that all in the call, and then we'd go away separately and put together a proposal with costings and everything for the project. So at this stage, probably the biggest myth or assumption would be that we see from clients is assuming, that everything from the existing website will be the same, and that the new website will just have additional features, or that there's features, that will just automatically carry over. I suppose the bigger thing in that is kind of the assumption that the developer or whoever has been reviewing the site is able to kind of be aware or see from looking at the site itself, like of all the functionality that a client may use it for, or if there's anything externally, especially for if you think of the likes of e-commerce websites. It's kind of a simple process, obviously setting up products and everything, for ordering, payments, everything, but it's what happens after that point. So does notifications get sent to a warehouse, off-site? Is it done through email, or what the process is outside the website? So for a lot of projects, there can be a lot of areas like that where it's kind of a whole view of like the business operations outside of it, that it's not very easy for somebody building a website or reviewing it to pick up on those. Following on then from the proposal, our next step would be the client requirements. So this is just gathering everything together for your new site. So for example, you may have content or products on your old site that you don't want to carry over. It's a really good opportunity to kind of freshen things up. We'd also be looking for the likes of your branding guidelines, logos, imagery, logins to hosting DNS. So there's a bunch of requirements, generally standard for most projects, but it does vary. So surrounding the client requirements, probably the biggest myth is that, the likes of finished content or imagery or branding, and that doesn't need to be done, or can be done in tandem with the website build. So previously in our projects, like a lot of delays or that would have come from building out effectively like the shell of the website, and then while the client or a third party might also be writing the content, or there might be a branding exercise for a rebrand going on simultaneously. But we found that leads to a lot of delays or duplication of work, whereas the website is built with current branding or the current content. Once that's built, then the final new content or new branding can come through, and it can be like vastly different than what's there. So effectively, you're kind of going back and rebuilding the website twice. That can lead to a lot of issues with project budgets and timelines. So I think that's probably from the early stages of the website, probably the biggest myth is that you don't need to have your content or branding finalized, because effectively you're trying to design or build something around something that doesn't exist or that you're not aware of yet. So that kind of takes us up to, I suppose, kicking off development. So I'll hand it over to David to talk us through that.
So as Point mentioned, with like obviously with the proposals and the scoping, a lot of that would also talk about what their old website they did on their old website, from a development point of view as well, just so that we know when we're building a new website what to consider and what not to consider, because every client's different. Some clients want to be able to edit every single aspect of the site. Some just want to be able to add a text box here and there. So it's very important for us as developer to know this before we start building the website. And the main reason is because we don't want to spend time building things that aren't of any value to the end user, the client that's going to end up using the website. And obviously that's a very important thing for them, is that when they get the website at the end, that they're able to maintain the website and use the website without having to get intervention from ourselves or another developer. So a couple of the myths that we kind of have in the development space whenever it comes to actually building the website is that there's this assumption that we start building the website immediately from day one. And that's not a fact. The fact is, as Quirk mentioned, we do need the content, and we also need everything signed off, and it makes things a lot easier from a development point of view, just so we're not repeating ourselves, and also from a client point of view, that everyone's on the same page and that we're building the website to the content and the spec that they have provided. Another one that's quite common is that this website will only take a week to build, and this is going to be a really quick process. The timelines are there to help, but the idea of the website being, done within a week, it usually depends on lots of bottlenecks like the content. We often also need to do things like the checklist and QA as well after the site. If you went to a freelancer or maybe someone with a little, less experience, they might say a website in a week, but we know from experience that you need to build a website and then you need to QA it and you need to prepare it for going live and, for the client. You don't want to rush something that's very important, because your website is your storefront on the web. So it's not the sort of thing that you want to rush or, not put time and consideration into. And then I've just got a couple more. One is just, can you change this thing? It's a wee small thing. It'll only take 2 seconds. The reason why that's a big myth is just because, we can do that every so often, maybe one or two things, that's fine. But the more if you keep doing that, the problem you end up having is that you are not considering other aspects of the development. So for example, they say you want to change this, we make that change, and then there's other parts that kind of cascade down the thing to get missed, this, that, and the other. So it's always better that we kind of just working from the scope and what we have that we've been given from the start. And then if these wee small things, it's not anything that's going to dramatically affect the entirety of the website. And that's not to be, challenging to the client. It's more to make sure that we're protecting the project for the client and for ourselves as well. So mainly the whole thing with development, as Boyd said, is just if we have a good scope and we can kind of build a website for the client rather than a website that we think will work for the client, we're kind of building a website that will work for them rather than the other way around. So I'm going to hand over to Emer now just to talk about the QA and the checklist side of things and how we kind of get the website actually prepared from the development to then going live.
So after a website is built, before you'll see the finalized website, we have a process internally which involves QA the website and carrying out our 3 key checklists. So these checklists have been designed over the span of a few years, over many different projects that we've done and things that we've noted needed to be tried and tested before a website goes live. So these cover pre-go live, SEO, and performance optimization, just to make sure that your website is working as it should before it goes live. So the checklist will cover things like making sure all your pages have been checked. It wouldn't just be the homepage. We would go through all the pages on your site to make sure everything's working as it should be. We would test things like links, forms, buttons, different things that you mightn't think to check when you're doing your client checks. We would make sure your images are loading. We would check it on different devices, like a mobile device, as most people, as you know, probably browse websites on their phones over a laptop. In most cases. So we would make sure that your website is working okay there. We would check it on a few different browsers just to make sure everything is loading as it should. And if you've asked us to redirect any pages, if you're coming to us from an existing site, we would just check that everything there has been done as well. Sometimes people, if they're maybe in a rush to get a website live, will say, well, what's the point in doing a QA? Like, can you not just skip it and save some time? But we would say you shouldn't do that. They're really, really important because fresh sets of eyes will often pick up on things that maybe our developer hasn't picked up on or that you haven't picked up on as a client. QAs are carried out by a different member of the team, so it's not the person who would have built your website. So often a fresh set of eyes can pick up things that maybe we as the PO wouldn't have seen or developer mightn't have seen because they've worked on your website so often. They're there to catch all of the technical issues before your website goes live, because it's better that these things are kind of picked up on and resolved before a website goes live rather than by one of your customers when it already has been live, maybe for a few weeks. We also have a final client review at the point where we've done your QAs. We'll then pass the site back to you for a final client review. At this point, there really shouldn't be anything that you need to resolve. Everything would usually be picked up during the internal development stage and by our QA. But if there's any little tweaks that you would like done before the website goes live, these will be done then as well. So it's kind of like a collaboration between us and the client at this point to making sure they're completely happy with their website. And at this point, we would then be good to go to get you booked in for a training session, which if David is your web developer at this point, he would take you through how to manage the website yourself, any questions that you have about managing the website yourself. And this is carried out before launch to ensure that you can handle and maintain your own website completely from the minute that it goes live, at which point we would obviously hand all the logins over and you'd be able to maintain it yourself. Following on from that, I suppose the second myth that we have kind of encountered would be during the website launch. So a lot of people will come and think that, it's just pushing a button to launch a site. And David can attest to us that that is not the case. Unfortunately, it's not an instant process. It can take a few hours and it is a very carefully planned process, which is why we'll often try to book it in like a week in advance. For example, it's not just something, obviously in urgent cases, yes, it can be planned one day in advance, but we prefer to try to plan it a little bit more, give us a bit more time just to get everything we need. So we would say that it's kind of like moving into a house. You wouldn't typically just buy a house and move straight in. You have to plan, you have to make sure that you've got everything you need, you have to make sure that all your electric is connected, and website launching is no different. So the things that we would consider during a website launch and the things that we would need from you as the client would be DNS information. We would consider things like where your website's going to be hosted. We would consider things like ensuring we've got a backup if you have a live and existing site to make sure that nothing's lost in case there's anything that maybe you would ever need from that site. Any DNS changes that need to be done, redirects, etc. So there are many things that we, as the web development side of things, would need to consider that a client might not think would need to be done. But these are why it's not necessarily an instant process. Even when your website is live, there's something called propagation, which means your website often may not appear instantly on everyone's device as the new website. Things like caching and the browser that you're using could cause you to see the old version of a site. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong. It's just different browsers and different devices can often pick up the old version of a site for up to 48 hours after a new website has gone live. It's not always the case and not something that we often see, but we do just like to highlight that to clients at the point of launch, just so that you're not worrying that there's anything wrong. It will often rectify itself within 48 hours, but it's usually 2 to 3 hours in our experience. But yeah, just something that we think is interesting, because when we explain the process to a lot of our clients, they would usually think it is a super quick process, but it does take a few hours. And obviously, once your website has gone live, we'll be doing things like post-go live checks, SEO checks, making sure that everything is appearing as it should. So yeah, unfortunately, it's not the straightforward process that everyone generally thinks it is. And then another myth that we have encountered is once your website's live, you don't need to do anything with it. So you've obviously made the investment in a website and people then think that that's it. For the next couple of years, the website doesn't need to be touched or managed. So we would say that that is definitely a myth. And we would liken this to your car, getting your car serviced. You wouldn't buy a new car and you wouldn't not get it serviced. So we would recommend maintaining your website and ensure that you're making changes and updates to it. On average, once or twice a month. We obviously, if you've got the capacity and resources, we would recommend doing things like updating your content, updating old content more often, add new content, add in case studies or blogs as often as you can. But if you're a little bit tighter on resources and you don't maybe have the time yourself, monthly is fine as well, just to make sure that your website is appearing on search engines and that Google and other search engines will be picking up that the content on the website is being updated as regularly as possible. So other things that we would recommend are things like plugin updates, just looking at your general SEO and kind of having a strategy for that when your website goes live is really important as well. So that you're not just leaving it up to chance that your website will, pick up traffic and that people will come and find you. You need to be taking active steps to make sure that your website is staying up to date and current, so that search engines will actually pick up on these things. And if it's the case that you don't have the time or the resources, we actually have plugin update packages, which your project manager can discuss with you at the point of going live. We've also got SEO packages, which can help with content and just making sure that your website is kept up to date on a monthly basis as well. Because we're aware that with a lot of our clients, they, have the best intentions, but maybe just don't have the time. And it's something that we can help out with even for 3 to 6 months. And then at that point, maybe you'll have the time to pick it up yourself. But definitely something that we can help with if needs be. So yeah, we just like to remind everyone that you do need to keep your website updated once it goes live. Unfortunately, it's not just a one and done situation.
Thank you, Emer. Hopefully that was very helpful for anyone listening. And we cleared up some common myths around the website process. Thanks for listening, and hopefully you'll tune in again soon.